So welcome everyone to the week 2 of our reset and recharge in lockdown. We've already had a chat with a couple of people who've been telling us about the sort of changes they've made and also a few of the challenges they've had. So let's have a look and see if we can work through a few more of these challenges. So this week, last week we focused on exercise and some dietary changes that people could make. This week, we're looking more at hydration and connection. And I think connection becomes even more important as we go through this lockdown. And, it's looking like it's going to become a little bit protracted, although there's a few signals that Gladys has been given off that once we get to a certain vaccination rate, it may improve. Now, we've already had a little bit of a chat, but I suppose if you want to just pop anything in the chat box that you think about, in terms of what you decided to change and what worked and what didn't. So, what are the sort of challenges you're finding? I mean, we've already had the comment about how homeschooling can be a bit disruptive when you're trying to work on healthy snacks, and other people are having snacks that are a bit more attractive to you. So that might be one thing. And if there's anything that you think you need help with at the moment, I'm probably going to come back to this after we've chatted about this other section, and just see if there is any other suggestions that people can make that can help the group. All right, so this week's focus, I wanted to look at 4 ways to improve hydration. I wanted to look a bit more at connection and then some goals for next week. So does that sound okay to everyone? Yep, all right. So first up, looking at hydration, the sort of things I was looking at for hydration were things like, is there something you can reduce? And I probably didn't put the one thing on the list that someone actually mentioned they were going to do. So the first thing is alcohol is really dehydrating, and tea and coffee can be somewhat dehydrating because the caffeine can be quite dehydrating for some people. So what I would recommend is either swapping out the tea and coffee for herbal teas and that sort of option. But the other thing to do is if you're still having, a tea or a coffee a day, with every cup of tea, just make sure you're having a glass of water as well. And that way you're keeping up your hydration at the same time. Ideally, I wouldn't have more than 2 or 3 cups of tea or coffee a day, because I think that can be just a little bit too much caffeine for people's systems. And you kind of get that burst of energy for 30 minutes and then you crash and you need another cup of coffee or tea. Although I have to say black tea doesn't seem to have the same incredibly stimulating effect of coffee and then the same crash afterwards. And it's probably because teas are more of the whole plant and they tend to have a range of other chemicals in them which are actually of assistance. So phytochemicals, and in green tea in particular, you have a high level of a word I can't say, but it's ECCG. And that's actually fairly useful as a phytochemical. So, if you can swap out the tea and the coffee for herbal teas, and even if you can swap, so black tea has about 48 milligrams of caffeine per cup. Green tea has about 28 milligrams. So the difference is the black tea is fermented. The green tea isn't treated for as long. So by swapping out green tea for black tea, you can actually reduce your caffeine. So you might want to still have the black tea or green tea in the morning for a bit of that energy boost, but don't keep going through the day. Now, the other thing I find for a lot of people is drinking water can get a bit boring. And some people tell me they don't like the taste. Now, part of it be, I grew up in Melbourne where the water was run over limestone. And it was really pure and it tasted really nice. And then we went to Adelaide, and I hope there's no one else here on the call from Adelaide, but in Adelaide, the water was quite like it was brown coming out of the tap. But, we were all used to say it was the upside down riverbank, and it was all the muddy surplus and the water tasted terrible. And most people would boil it or they had a filter. Living in Sydney, I think it's a bit more mixed. If you're in an area with old pipes, it's actually not a bad idea to actually look at having a water filter. And you find the water tastes better if it's been through a filter, because there's a lot of things that we put in water to purify it and to settle what they call the turbidity. So they put aluminium sulfate in so that otherwise, I don't know if you've ever seen Warragamba Dam, but if you do, it's kind of cloudy and brownish. And there's a lot of soil and other things in it. So the aluminium sulfate settles all that to the bottom so it doesn't come through the tap so much. But you only need the aluminium sulfate till it gets to you. You don't need it. You don't need to be drinking it. The other thing is a lot of old pipes in Sydney were lead or copper. So again, without a filter, you're getting trace amounts of that lead or copper, which is again not very helpful for you. And I think a building biologist I know says, have a filter or be the filter. So, you know, it can be a really good idea to have a water filter on your tap. Just make sure that it's actually removing most of the metals and other contaminants. Now, the other thing I quite like doing, though, is adding back to the water and having like a soda stream or something that puts in carbonation, gives you bubbles. It just gives you a bit of a different taste. And sometimes I find that is just more it's more rehydrating than just drinking straight water. You can also add something to it, like a squeeze of lemon juice or some crushed mint, just to give it a little bit of flavour. So that's a way you can actually improve your hydration, make it taste a bit more interesting at the same time. Now, the other couple of things, if you look at a lot of vegetables, they're really high in fluid and water. I think celery and watermelon are probably the two I think about, which, you know, have a very high water content. So eating more vegetables in a way is another way of improving your hydration because you're getting more fluid with the plant. But if you find it hard to munch your way through, you know, half a celery, or other vegetables, then have a look at adding more soup. So it could be pureed, you know, and really making soup is pretty easy. I have to say, I've got the advantage of a Thermomix. So basically what I can do is put something in there and blitz it with some, you know, broth. So pretty much every single recipe seems to be, you know, you add your base of whatever you know, a bit of garlic or, so I made a, Asian pumpkin soup on the weekend. I blitzed some ginger in the bottom of the Thermomix. I added my pumpkin and stock and I cooked that for about 20 minutes, pureed it and add some coconut milk. And that was a really nice, tasty, simple soup. And it was a really good serve of veggies. So that can be another way to get it in. I have to say in winter when I'm not feeling like eating, but I have to have something on my stomach in the morning, I often just have a cup of veggie broth with a little bit of salt in it. So if I've made it myself, it's normally got enough salt in, but otherwise it's a bit flavorless. So either salt or grated ginger are both good things to add to it just to give it a bit more oomph. And I find that a warm cup of broth can be really nourishing in winter as a good base for breakfast. I did make a really nice chicken broth when I was doing pre-colonoscopy, but we won't go into that. And what I did was I put like a lot of the celery leaf, which you often don't use, in with the chicken bones and, you know, a little bit of carrot and whatever. And it made a really flavoursome broth having all that celery in it. So it actually was a little bit green even from all the celery I used. So when you're cooking with celery or a carrot, chop off the ends as you would do anyway when you're preparing it. Throw it in a freezer bag so that when you came to make stock or something, you can just pour it in your pot and it's all ready with all the ends that you need to give it a bit more flavour. So that's a simple way to make a really nice chicken broth. Now, I don't know what other soups you like. The other one I find really good is cauliflower, and probably a fairly similar process to what I would do, except I'd probably put a leek. And the other thing I've found is really useful for adding a bit of flavour to a soup is a parsnip. Parsnips make things a bit creamier. So it's a vegan trick, but usually with a cauliflower soup, I'll use leek as a base. So saute the leek and then cook the cauliflower and broth or, you know, water or a veggie stock with it and puree it at the end, and with a little bit of parsnip as well. It makes a really lovely creamy soup because leek, again, gives things more that creamy flavour without using milk or cream. I did have a version of that cauliflower soup recipe which involved like a cup of cream and half a cup of grated cheese, which was like a gratin almost by the time you finished it. It was very tasty, but probably a little bit too heavy in the cheese and cream. Now, the last thing I'd suggest is a green smoothie. Again, is a good way to add more hydration, but something a bit interesting. And typically the ratio with a smoothie is about 1 cup of leafy greens. So whether that's spinach or kale or something like that, plus half a cup of fruit. And if you want to make up a few days supply, often it's a good idea just to freeze your fruit. So if you cut up a pineapple, you've got it there for 3 or 4 days. Nice combinations can be something like cucumber, ginger, and pineapple, that sort of thing, or using apples with some greens. My favorite site for this one is called Simple Green Smoothies. And it's an amazing site, mainly because the food photography on it is awesome. And they're on both Facebook and Instagram. But they've got lots of tips on sort of the right ratios so that your smoothie is really tasty. I've found that 1 cup of leafy greens to half a cup of fruit tends to work quite well. And if you want to have it as a breakfast or a meal replacement, then what you need to do is add a protein powder so that you've got a decent dose of protein in it. And then either you could add coconut water, you can just add normal water. I'm not a big fan of milk just because I don't like the taste of it, but some people might add a milk to it as well. But just that sort of ratio seems to work well on those smoothies. All right, so that's a really good way to improve hydration across the range. So we're adding it through fruits, vegetables, a bit of carbonation and some swaps. So over, a few weeks, we're actually getting a lot more fluid in our diet from a range of sources. And the advantage of getting it with veggies is you're also getting the electrolytes you need to help you absorb it. So there's an old saying with electrolytes, where salt goes, water follows. So it's not just sodium, it's potassium, it's calcium, it's magnesium. So all those other valuable electrolytes you get from vegetables really help with your absorption of the fluid. And ultimately the goal is, the reason you want to improve your hydration is because ideally you want to have cells that are plump and round like a grape, not squishy like a sultana. So if they're a bit squishy, it's usually because you're not getting enough electrolytes, you're not getting enough fluid. So if you can deal with those two aspects, your cells will be plumper and better hydrated, but they also work better because your cells rely on having receptors on them for things to come in and out. And if it's squishy like a sultana, it's harder for everything to function. And there was a really simple study they did a few years ago in a nursing home where they just got the residents to drink 1 litre of water a day. Now, for most of them, they probably needed more than that, but they just found by increasing it, a lot of them could actually reduce the medication they needed simply by being hydrated enough for things to function properly. So that's a significant benefit. But, I think overall, you tend to feel a lot better when you're appropriately hydrated. Your joints are lubricated, everything works a little better. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention was some herbal teas, and I thought it'd be good to look at some herbal teas that were actually useful from the therapeutically as well. So I've actually included a range here, but one of the ones I would recommend, I'd already talked a little bit about green tea for energy, the matcha green tea, which is a ground tea leaf. That's got a really amazing flavour, and a lot of people really enjoy that. In fact, I think there's a new trend for matcha green tea lattes. Not sure if I'm ready to try that one, but I do like the green tea option. Now, if your digestion's challenged, the sort of herbal teas, if you find you've had a big meal and you're feeling a bit full and bloated, then it's probably good to look at something like peppermint or ginger. And for peppermint, I often just like, if I've got fresh peppermint, and you know how sometimes when you buy herbs for a recipe, you use like 2 stalks and then you've got half the bunch left over. I always look at that as great. Now I've got lots of fresh peppermint tea I can make. And I just get a whole stalk, I crush it because that releases some of the essential oils, push it down the bottom of the pot and pour the hot water on and just let it steep for about 3 or 4 minutes. You really need to let it steep though so it absorbs the flavors, and ideally it's covered so that it keeps the oils in as well. The other one I like for digestion is ginger. And that's actually probably a better option if you're a bit chilly as well, because ginger's a bit of a, what we call a circulatory stimulant. So it really helps push things through your system and warm you up a little bit. So that can be a good one to include in combination with other herbs. And you might often find that, like a lemongrass and ginger can be a really nice flavour. but it is, ginger is actually a good, what we call anti-emetic, which means it's good for mild nausea. And a lot of people have used it for, say, morning sickness or something like that. Now, I often use, if I'm making a recipe with ginger, I'll peel the ginger, and because I'm using an organic ginger, I put the ginger peel in the pot and use that to make my tea. So I get another use out of it. And that's often quite nice and flavoursome. You're having trouble sleeping? Passion flower is a really good individual herb to look at, but often what you'll find is the sleep combos will have passion flower in it. So it's a really nice, very gentle sedative herb, doesn't have any of those addictive properties of other medications, but it can just be a good way to kind of calm down for the evening. Probably the other one I really like too is chamomile. And I don't know if those of you who are more local, but Patterson's, who are down on the corner here, they actually do a chamomile tea with real flowers, and you can actually see the little flowers in the tea. And that's just lovely. And I actually find if I have that late afternoon, it's calming but energizing. So it actually really helps reset for the, you know, especially when I've got like 2 or 3 more appointments after that afternoon cup of tea. A couple of other ones that are worth mentioning. Sage, which is lovely for menopausal symptoms, so for flushing. You probably need a couple of cups a day for it to be useful. And for immunity, elderflower. So one of the over-the-counters that I really like for sore throats and things is called sambucol, because the herb's full name is Sambucus nigra. And the advantage of elderberry though is the lozenges are actually, they taste nice. You know, a lot of those codrils and things, they actually leave a really nasty aftertaste. The only problem with the lozenges, you have to hide them from kids after they have the sore throat because they want to keep taking them. But it's really great because it gives you that topical application if your throat is quite sore. So for immunity, a tea with elderflower in it can be a really nice combination. And for, there is a combination called YEP, which is yarrow, elder, and peppermint, which is really good for colds and flus. So if you ever see that, that's a nice one to have in the cupboard. But the other thing I would do consistently is I often make up a, if I'm really congested, I'll make up either a lemon and garlic tea or a lemon and ginger. And with the garlic, I use organic garlic. I put about 5 cloves in and a whole organic lemon, which I've quartered, and I boil it up with a couple of litres of water, but I boil it, or I bring it to the boil and then simmer for about 20 minutes. And the reason I do that is because I want all the oils, the limonene out of the peel in the lemon, as well as the flavour. And Jean's just joined us. So hi, Jean. We'll come back to how you went with your challenges at the end of this. But just with the lemon and garlic tea, what I find is if I boiled up the garlic and lemon, it's quite tart, but it really helps that mucus settle for a couple of hours and give you some relief. So what I would suggest is, you know, adding a little bit of Manuka honey to it as well, just to make it taste a bit more palatable. But also because Manuka honey has a lovely antibacterial, antiviral action. So you're getting a really great combination of lemon, garlic, and the Manuka honey. And, you know, if you can't get Manuka honey, even just a raw honey from your local beekeeper would probably be just as effective. May not have the same UMF factor of a Manuka honey. And, but I still think it really helps with the flavour. So I was fortunate enough to be given a kilo of local honey from my brother, from a local beekeeper the other day. So I'll try that with my next bunch of lemon and garlic tea. But hopefully you've found some suggestions there that might help with hydration, but also time of day. So you think about it, you go, okay, well, in the morning, I might look at the green tea. Through the day, if I want help with my digestion, it could be the peppermint and ginger or something for immunity. And then in the evening, I might look at something like passion flower. And I'm sure you'll find that if you're looking at a sleep combo or something like that, it will probably have some ingredients like passion flower in. And Jean, who's on the call at the moment, has made up a few herbal teas in clinic. And I'm pretty sure there's a YEP out on reception at the moment, isn't there, Jean?
Yeah, yep. Yes, there is. Yes, there's a sleep mix. There's a YEP, which is great for your immunity. I've also got a menopause tea as well.
Okay. And do you remember off the top of your head what's in the menopause tea?
Has got some sage in it. It's got some lavender, which is really nice and calming. It's got, no, I can't remember exactly.
Okay, all right.
I can put it up there later for
I
everyone if
I
you want
can
to
pop
try it.
out it when we finish this and just quickly have a look at the ingredients. But yes, there's some, Jean's been making some teas so that we've got access to them, which is just lovely. All right, just the other thing I wanted to quickly cover was looking at connection. And I think at the moment, you know, this is one way of connecting, but it can be a bit hard sometimes depending on age and stage. You know, if you've got family with different ages, I always remember when I was teaching, the best time to have a chat with my son was when I was teaching him to drive, because we could both look straight ahead and not engage with each other. You know, he couldn't see me, but he could ask those conversations, you know, ask about those topics and those conversations. So, you know, sometimes that's when we had those more difficult and challenging conversations around behaviour. Probably not the best idea to do it while he was learning to drive, but fortunately he picked it up quite quickly. So it was a good time to have a chat with him about things. So one of the things I found really good during lockdown is setting up online board games, particularly with other friends who had kids who are a bit older. But there was some really, I found one that is literally called Board Games Arena. And to be honest, it was my daughter who found it. And Board Games Arena has a range of, they've taken the board games and other card games that you would play and converted them electronically. So you can all log on and play with each other. So what we do is we set up a Zoom so we can, you know, chat. And at the same time, we're playing the board game. So it's just a good way to interact with more of a mixed group once they get their head around playing the board game. What I would suggest, though, is they go on the site before the call and actually try out a few of the games and see what they like. On that one, I like one called Sushi Go. There's another one called Six Nimt, which is quite a good card game. And there's a Carcassonne, which is a big like planning strategy game, which can be a bit difficult for me to work on the screen, but both my kids seem to cope with it quite well. So there's a few of the old friends that are there that you may recognise. And I just find it's a really good way to connect in with people across an age range. The other option is pretty simple, and it's just picking up this and making a phone call. And, you know, again, maybe if you aren't close to friends or friends are in other states, make yourself a cup of tea or coffee and just ring them and have a virtual cup of tea with them. Or you could put your headphones in and go for a walk around the local park while you're talking to someone. So it's a bit of a walk and talk. I would also suggest, you know, there is a lot of value in writing letters, not emails, physical letters or notes, or sending someone a card, or just reaching out and letting people know you're thinking about them at the moment. I think they're all really great ways to do it. Actually, I have a card that I can do online, which is really nice. It's called Touch Note. And what you do is you can put a photo in there, or it can just be, you can just choose one of their card patterns. And I've often used it for Christmas cards. But the great thing is that they mail it in the country you're sending it to. So when I had English friends in lockdown, I'd send them cards, but it would get there quite quickly. And also at the moment, I don't really want to go to the post office and queue up to get, you know, stationery and other things. So it's a nice way of being able to do it online. So that might be another way you can reach out and connect. So in your challenges for this week, I just want you to think about how you're going to connect in with one other person over the next week. And it might be for the benefit of your own mental health, or for that person that you know is struggling a little bit in lockdown at the moment. Okay, so for this week, I'm just going to wrap up the recording in a second, and we're going to go and actually think about what our goals are. So for this week, looking at the hydration and connection we've talked about, is there a specific target you want to meet, a specific goal you want to meet, or is it just, I'm going to try Yep Tea this week? So I just want you to think about one of them while I do the admin round here. Okay, so I'm just going to